There you go. Peter's got a mobile horse behind him, which he's been explaining to me the reason of.
Yeah, it's just, I'm in a much smaller living space. I decided to sort of scale down, and that's the only thing I can't figure out where to put it. And that's only part of it. That's only part of it. There's another whole piece to it.
And there's no wall that can go on?
No. I mean, I've got stuff hanging all through the apartment, but there's no big. And I also don't want to have people come into my living room and see a giant mobile horse. They'll think, did I take a wrong turn off the freeway? It's going to be like not good. So,
how much is the gas today? But where did you get? That's a very cool thing, actually. Where did you get it? How did you get it?
I bought it in an antique store in Pasadena, easily 25 years ago. Wow. I just thought, that's cool. I do this, sometimes. Like I was traveling and I was in Savannah, which turned out to be like a great city. And there was an antique shop downtown, and they had the letters from a Gulf station. It's not like a theme, by the way. It's not like I'm only collecting this stuff, the signage from gas stations. But I have the Gulf letters someplace, and all you can do is really put them out of order, like flug stuff like that, and that's all you can do. It's not a lot of fun. I paid too much for those, and those are in storage, so it's ridiculous.
I'm really liking that horse, and it's red. Red's kind of like the theme color around here. So Peter, the last time we spoke, well, I think you did my living room after you did this little show, but it's been about 5 years. It's been a while.
Yeah, and I was working with Norman Lear. We were doing a pilot together, and I always tell this story of the time that I did your show, because that was the day that we sold the show, and we ended up driving all over town. It was one of those things where you're pitching, all over and in the car. And by the time I did your show, it was like 5:30 or something like that. And when we got settled, it did it, and then I left. And before that, we'd sold the show at NBC, and I said, and Norman said to me as we were walking out, "How long will it take me to get to Pasadena?" And I said, "Well, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, something like that." I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, there's a judge there who does screenings of movies, and he's showing Cold Turkey, which was one of Norman's movies, and I'm going to speak afterwards." So anyway, I said, "Okay, well, good luck. Here's, I think if you go this way, you'll be fine. Whatever else." I can't believe I'm telling him how to get to Pasadena. So
he had a driver then, didn't he?
Yes, he had.
Yeah, of course.
But so I did your show, and then I was driving home, and I started to bitch to myself about it had been such a long day, and I hadn't eaten, and I was hungry, and I was like, whatever, and tired. And at the time, our ages were transposed. We had the same digits. He was 95 and I was 59 at the time. And all of a sudden I stopped in the middle of all this grousing and went, "My God, Norman's still in Pasadena." 95.
And you had wine. That was probably not a good move.
I was probably loaded and driving.
Yeah, because you also needed to have some food. I didn't give you any food. We just gave you wine. That was not a good move at the end of the day.
But I always think about how much I was complaining, and this guy who's like near 100 is like out on the town. God knows what time you get home.
And it continued. I was complaining when you were at the studio because I couldn't get Norman to do the show, and he had done my living room, but he did. I went right before the pandemic, I went to his office. He was still going into the office every day 3 years ago. And I went to his office and we had a great time. And as I mentioned to you, I just saw him, 100 years old. He's walking up to the stage doing a tribute to George Shapiro. Unbelievable.
Yeah. The last time I saw him was probably pre-pandemic, and I stopped by his office at Sony.
Right.
And he was out on the balcony having lunch. And he said to me with such excitement, he said, "Do you see what I'm eating? Do you know what this is called? It's a poke bowl. I've never had a poke bowl in my entire life. I've just had 3 of them." So I love the fact that you can be that age and be enthusiastic, for things.
Especially about pokey.
But exactly. Something new,
So tell everybody the show you were working on with Norman. We were talking about it briefly before. Tell us about Guess Who Died, okay. So this is what I recall. I said I wasn't going to talk a lot, and I'm already talking too much. But when I was in Norman's office, he had boxes on the floor, boxes and boxes of show ideas that had never made it to air. Did you know that?
No.
Boxes and boxes. And one of those was Guess Who Died. He told the story of how he had wanted to do that years before, and then he resurrected it with you. Is that correct?
Yes, it was like a passion project for him, that he kept being told this will never get made, never get made. And so finally, I got, was suggested, and, if you have the opportunity to work with Norman, you're doing it. I don't care if it was like cleaning up in front of the studio. I'd be out there with him with a bag, So, and it was really interesting, to work with an icon, which made it sort of difficult, because sometimes I'd say, Norman, I'm going to cut a couple of things here. Why don't you tell me what you don't want me to cut? I'm just trying to be so deferential, because, he should know better than I do. So that was it. That was really interesting. And we made the show, I think, to both of our satisfaction, and NBC just didn't take to it. It wasn't.
Okay, so now as I recall, you had another offer. I don't know if it was Netflix. I don't remember what the other offer was, but it was a place where you guys were going to have more freedom than network.
Yeah, I think we believed that, or maybe I told you that when I believed that, and then I think upon closer inspection, it turned out to be not a good deal. It was, sort of like, all right, well, we'll give you $6 and half of a camera, and it's like that kind of thing. And it was like, wait a minute, this isn't what you said. That was that I still remember that pitch too. And I'll tell you right now, I believe it was at everybody moves around, so you think, right. Oh, I'll think about the place and I'll whatever. I think it was Amazon, maybe a long time ago.
Right. It was like 6
totally
years
different
ago.
regime.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Amazon. And it was me and Norman and Brent Miller, who's Norman's partner, So it's the three of us, but I'm really doing the pitch. And every now and then I'll look at Norman and he'll take over and he'll charm them and do this whole thing. It was the longest pitch of my life.
How so?
At one point, we were pitching to 3 people. And
wait, were you pitching to babies, like to 20 or 30-year-olds? Yes, of course.
Yes, we're pitching to younger people. And I swear to God, this is not an exaggeration. At one point, the person in the middle actually did this.
No.
Like check their watch. And I'm like, Jesus, this is terrible. And it was just, it went, all the oxygen went out of the room. It was absolutely death. And at the end, they went, well, that's wonderful. We'll do that. I was like, what the hell? You put me through that and then say yes?
Wow.
Very strange. Very strange.
Well, that's interesting. So now, as I also recall, at the time when you were first courted to go work with Norman, it was to do a reboot of All in the Family. And I'm thinking now, it wasn't 6 years ago, it was 5 years ago. And I remember you were kind of like, I'm not going to redo All in the Family. And because One Day at a Time was already on the air and was doing very well, the reboot. But now there has been a reboot of All in the Family. So,
well, there's been a different treatment of it.
Yeah.
There's been sort of a celebrity treatment of it, and which is, if you think about it, actually pretty smart, because the reason I would never reboot All in the Family is because those performances were iconic. There's just no way you're going to recreate that. It was the equivalent of like when Mel Brooks did The Producers. I was thinking to myself, and I actually had seen Mel, and I said, you got to do Young Frankenstein. And then he did it, and I went, oh, that was a mistake, because those performances were iconic and they couldn't be matched. And the same thing would have been with All in the Family. So, and if you were going to do All in the Family now, I don't know who put it on. It would be to tackle the same topics, the audience.
Well, it was so politically incorrect then. And I don't know how Norman got away with what he got away with. I
it was
really
just
don't.
it was a different time. Maybe they just thought it would fail immediately. I have no idea. I mean, they put a warning on it on the original show, which they eventually removed.
Mhm.
But it's not the right time, with political correctness and everything. You just couldn't do it. So for multiple reasons, that was never going to happen. So they at least figured out a way to do it where they're not even, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
They're taking original scripts and they're stunt casting it is what they're doing. And so now it's sort of an event, but
Right.
you're still getting to see the material and whatever. So I think they figured out a way to do it.
Okay, we'll say that.
Okay. Boy.
We'll say that. Peter, I don't know if I think I told you this in a text recently, but I'm re-binging Rescue Me.
Mhm.
And we talked about this a lot last time, but this is a new audience for this. But for me, as a woman in recovery with a history of addiction, I to this day, and I didn't think this would be true. Snuffy and I are watching it. He had not seen it the first time. And I'm coming back and seeing it after you went off the air in 2011, season 7. We're in season 3 right now, but you started in 2004, I think.
Something like that.
It is as timely, as relevant. The 9/11 stuff aside, although, those, I mean, we all remember everything about it, don't we? That we'll never forget that.
Yeah.
I am just blown away. I still don't understand how you as a normie, I was unaware the last time I interviewed you, I didn't remember how many episodes you actually directed and wrote. I mean, I knew you were the co-creator, but I didn't realize that you had your both hands, both feet, all body in. How the hell, as a normie, did you have like a great room of writers who were addicts? I mean, how did you do this?
Well, I'll be completely honest with you. I mean, well, first of all, I'm not quite a normie. I mean, I'm a gambling addict. So I've had a gambling problem for many years, and it's been controlled for the last decade or so.
Controlled? How do you go to is it controlled in the rooms or other methods?
No, it's controlled given that I don't have access to my money. That's the only way. That was ultimately the only way to control it, was just to say he can't have any money, which is embarrassing sometimes, when I have to ask my partner, can you give me $20? It's kind of embarrassing, but that was how I did it. So I certainly do understand addiction, but the reality is Rescue Me never had a room. 3 people wrote that show: Dennis, myself, and a guy named Evan Riley.
It shows.
We wrote the entire 100 and whatever the hell episodes. It's insane.
It shows.
But well, yeah, and it may show. I mean, look, it may show in terms of quality sometimes dipping or
quality,
whatever.
Consistency, continuity. I mean, it shows.
Yeah. But it became.
But Dennis, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Dennis, I know, had a cigarette addiction.
Yeah.
Is Dennis an alcoholic? I don't know his story.
I don't really know his. We've never discussed it, but he has.
Well, so who had all that insight into that? The drinking.
We knew many people, some of whom were associated with the show, who were more than willing to talk to us.
I see.
And say, here's what my life is like, and here's how I need the program, and here's how I've fallen away from the program, and here's so they were more than willing to open up about that. And we
did anybody ever say to you, that's not the way it is? Like, I wouldn't do that, or
no,
because you guys never hit a false note, did you?
I don't think so. I mean, it was, because we dealt so much with failure, that felt real. The characters are very flawed and continually fail. And, I may have said this the last time I talked to you because I forget, but I think over time, I always tend to go, oh yeah, that was a good show, just kind of like, or whatever, that was a piece of shit. Whatever I'm talking about my own work, I'm sometimes not complimentary. I think a lot of people are that way. But with Rescue Me, as time has gone on, it has taken on more of a patina for me of a massive accomplishment.
Massive.
And I always say it is quite an audacious show. To think that you could do a show post 9/11 that used 9/11 as a touchstone and make it funny and painful and ultimately hopeful. That I don't know. I'm still thinking, how did we do it?
I don't know how you did it. And you did all of those things and more. You dealt with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
You dealt with gay on the peripheral within that context, which was so taboo.
Well, I covered that.
So
That was my own story, I guess.
But so many things that weren't being dealt, and just the physical violence, spousal abuse, and I love, we're not up to it yet in season 3, but Tommy Gavin goes through those stages of drinking, getting sober, going out again. Then he starts to pray. Then he goes to meetings and he lies, and then he tells the truth. And then he finds God, just, it's so real. So real.
We did it. I love the show. I should go back and watch it now.
It's great.
Dennis, I want to do a mystery show. We've never done one. It's a different structure. And it had to do with him going drinking with his daughter, which is like really a low point, where they go out drinking, and somebody, I think it was Lenny Clark's character, I think, or Bobby's character, who they are sick of his drinking and they poison a bottle. They think that's gonna, they lace a bottle with something that'll make him really sick. So they think that'll teach him this lesson and maybe turn him around. Except his daughter drinks from that. And they can't find her. And
not up to that yet.
Completely screwed. He's completely has no memory of the night. And so it's really dragging information out of a person who can't remember anything as the clock is ticking, as who knows where she is, how sick she is, whatever, they can't find her. And I just loved writing backwards, like writing all the clues to, as he's going, it was a bar called this. Well, it wasn't a bar, it was a beach. And there was this, and there were a pair of earrings, and it was a really fun, I can't remember which, it was a later season, but I can't remember. I don't know why I'm talking about this, but I really enjoyed it.
No, I'm telling you, watch it again. It is just, and I think I told you this last time, my favorite moment in that show, I have so many, but Dennis is outside a bar and he wants to go, he's sober at this point and he wants to go in and he wants to drink, and he calls his sponsor and the sponsor talks him down and the camera pulls back and the sponsor's in front of a bar lovingly looking in, and it's like, oh my God, that is just genius. How addiction works. And our good friend Jack McGee, I was in touch with him earlier, sends his love to you. What a great, Jack is amazing in that show. He is absolutely amazing.
When you look at that punham on Jack and say he's a firefighter, I buy it. That's not an actor. That's like
absolutely.
That's a real guy. He just happened to be a really good actor too.
An excellent actor. Everybody is pitch perfect. And also just the fact that they love each other, the relationships are so complex, and people love each other, hate each other, go away, come back. I mean, it's just, it's very layered and wonderful. So, okay. So we're going to go back to your career stuff, but the pandemic happened. It's 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Were you in the middle of something when all that went down?
I was very lucky to be working. I had done just before COVID, I had executive produced and written the reboot of Mad About You with Paul and Helen. And so that was a challenging experience, just because we had a very accelerated schedule, which would have been difficult to, deliver on. And then in the middle of it, Helen was in a really bad car accident. So we lost, it was like, it just kept getting worse in terms of how can we ever get through this? And, Paul and I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. There was no choice. He'd be shooting the show for that. I'd be off camera writing next week's. I mean, it'd just be crazy. So he did that. And then I left. I'd had a deal at Sony for a number of years, and I left there and I went back to FX, where I'd done
Rescue Me.
And so during the pandemic, I was developing 2 different shows, one of which was actually very personal, a show that I said, someday maybe I'll be able to write this, which was about coming out in middle age, about a guy, you know, father and a husband and father coming out in middle age. So I wrote that. And I went through a rather challenging development process. That's all I'm going to say. A rather challenging development process where I ended up not necessarily doing the show that I wanted to do. But I did go to Toronto this winter.
Oh, you shot it.
I shot 2 episodes. I shot the first 2 episodes, and then they passed. So that was a real disappointment. And I had been writing another show about a Catholic priest in a small town, very much like the town that I grew up in. And that sort of fell by the wayside too. So it wasn't really, I was working, but nothing, I had nothing to show for it, which is always like a bummer, you know.
Who was playing you?
Cal Penn. Because if it's a gay man, we needed to cast a gay man.
Mm-hmm.
And just as we were starting to cast Cal, it sort of came out that Cal had come out. And somebody said, wouldn't that be a good idea? And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. So he did it. It was wonderful. I thought he did a great job. We had a great cast. I can always tell when it goes swimmingly and the cast is great and everything. There's no way that show's going forward. You know, it's the shows where everybody hates each other and they just nobody wants to be there. Those get picked up and they just run and run and run. You know?
Oh so once the pandemic hit, what was your life? What was your life like during that period?
I had decided that I was going to drink my way through it. And I was going to have a quarantini every night at 5 o'clock. I was going to kill all sorts of viruses with vodka, you know. and this lasted for a week, like maybe a week. And I went, well, this is not gonna happen. And I just had this moment where I was like, you know, I'm gonna come out of this COVID period better than how I went in. And I got lucky because the gym that I belonged to down the street opened a gym on their roof outside.
Wow.
And so I was able to work out. I went to the gym every day.
Wow.
Lost almost 40 pounds.
Holy you're the only person who lost weight during
I know, and without getting COVID. I never got COVID.
Me either.
I know. I'm knocking on the wood, on the laminated wood product person.
Laminated wood product.
And I never got it. And I'm in better shape now than I have been. I weigh the same as I did in high school.
Wow, that's
what I did. I mean, that's what I focused on. While I was suffering with my writing, that's what I did.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask you, because I know so many people got really creative and really productive, and they cleaned every drawer in there. I did none of that. I mean, I went live a lot, but I did no basic writing. I did no basic So how serious were you about lockdown and all of that stuff, and how normalized have you gotten? Like, are you back to normal completely?
Yeah, I know people who have, I think, been psychologically altered by the experience, you know, which is really unfortunate. I remember the first days of, you know, leaving my house and thinking, like walking in the parking garage with nobody there going, I wonder if I'm breathing, you know, and I thought, I can't live like this. I just can't live like this. So all I can do is be as safe as I can be. But I'm not going to put myself into situations that are unsafe. I did, because I traveled during COVID, and I traveled like some crazy stuff. Like I went to Florida, which, you know, it doesn't, you know, COVID doesn't exist there. Apparently it skipped, you know, it's all bunched at the border on Georgia, but it doesn't exist there. So, because I was visiting my mother, and at a certain point, I'm like, you're leaving, you're getting on a plane, you're going home, because you're not staying down here with this craziness. And I went to Florida twice. And only only one time in all that time did I go, this isn't safe. And it was I was at Logan Airport on a shuttle bus to take me to the rental car. And I was like, there are too many people in here. This is all too close. I don't like this. But other than that, it was just, I wore a mask. I got the shots. I did everything I was supposed to do. I never get sick.
Poo, poo, poo. And
That's right.
so what is life like now? So did you get back into a writing discipline? What's your life like now?
I'll be honest with you. I was very depressed about the show that I shot not going, because obviously it was a very personal story, and I really believed in it. And I actually fell into some kind of a depression where I had to go back into therapy, which I'm still doing. It really I had a bad time, and it made me question everything I'd ever done. Like I almost was saying, my career's a fluke. Clearly I'm not talented, but somehow I've managed to fool everybody. It was really some dark shit. So it's been hard for me to get back into a writing, because I have to sort of push that down.
Mhm.
You know, it's very.
And you don't
hard.
think that has anything to do with the pandemic? You think it's just because of that one project?
Yeah. I don't. I really didn't let the pandemic change my outlook. I mean, I felt more bad for my kids, because I was like, you guys have to be really safe. Don't think, because you're young, you're indestructible. I was more worried about them, but I was like I'm doing everything right. So I don't have to worry about it. Like, I don't have to let this affect.
Going to Florida is not doing everything right, Peter. Not in anybody's book.
That was more of a rescue mission to get my mother out.
Okay.
88 years old, and I'm like, come on, get out of here, you kook.
So is she here now?
She was back home in Massachusetts.
Oh, she's in Massachusetts.
But she's going back to Florida soon. She's going to take a cruise, of course, which is like COVID central. She's going to take another cruise. So.
Yes, let's just blow it through the air vents.
I know. It's like
I have a friend on a cruise starting today. I don't understand any of that.
A bucket of viruses, a floating bucket of
virus. My son is going to a concert tonight. Harry Styles. He's going to be in the pit. The last time he went to a concert and went in the pit, he got COVID. This is, okay.
My daughter went to a concert, got COVID. So it's just like, okay, I don't know what you expected, but okay.
Although I went to the Who last night, but it was in the Hollywood Bowl. It was outside. So that's a whole different deal. Okay. So, I had forgotten that you really got your start in theater. I don't think we talked about this last time. How did this career come up? I know you were a performer first. Where did that come from? Did you come from a show busy family? What was the thing?
No, nobody in my family was into that. I started to do shows when I was in high school, just like a lot of people. And I thought I was going to be an actor, and I quickly got over that idea. I was still performing, and I was doing an act with a partner, and we started in Minneapolis and went back to New York, and eventually we performed off Broadway in like 1989. And at that point, I saw the end of that. Like, that wasn't going to go to a next step. That off Broadway show was it. And I was turning 30, and I was like, I was married to my first wife, and I thought, I gotta do something else. And I had an agent, thank God, and for the act.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I think I'm interested in writing for television. And they, of course,
okay, wait a minute. Wait, we have to go back a couple steps.
Yeah.
You're writing this cabaret. It was a cabaret act, right? So
we wrote it and performed it. Yeah.
So you wrote it. So was that the first writing you had done?
No, while it's strange that the act didn't get me noticed in Hollywood. I saw something. I must have seen an ad there was a theater in New York back then in the late 80s called the Manhattan Punchline.
Yes.
They had an annual festival of one-act comedies. And I saw this and I thought, I can probably write a 1-act comedy. It's not as long as 2 acts or 3. I can probably. So whatever. So I wrote one and I turned it in, and they did it. And they ended up doing one of my plays for the next 4 years. One of them was a musical, but they did one every 4 years. Wow. And they all got better. Like the first one was really almost like a university variety show sketch. It was pretty broad, but they got more.
How did you know how to do this, Peter? Were you studying? Did you go to school for it?
No, I probably had been writing, college sketches, in shows that I put on in college. And then I had moved to Minneapolis when I flunked out of school. And
that is unbelievable to me that you flunked. Yeah. What school were you at?
UMass Amherst.
And you flunked out of school. That's hard to.
Because I didn't go, because I was too busy doing shows.
Ah.
And I didn't go to class. So eventually, of course, they said, you might want to reconsider, which was their way of saying, get out.
Yeah.
And I had a connection at the school who knew this fellow, whose name was Dudley Riggs in Minneapolis. And he had a theater there called the Brave New Workshop. And he said, I got this fellow from UMass got me on the phone with Dudley. And Dudley said, yeah, I'll give you a job. So when the summer ended, I took a train and I went to Minneapolis. I stopped in Chicago. This is only when you're young. Okay. Vicki, this is only when you're young. The train stops in Chicago. I get off. I go to Second City. I go in and I say, hi, I'm here for my audition.
What?
And they said, we don't have any record of, first of all, we're not auditioning people and we don't have any record. And I just went, oh, I just got off the train. I came all the way from Boston, which wasn't a lie.
What
and
balls?
I must have been believably crestfallen because they said, well, come back in half an hour and we'll pull everyone together. And they did. And I auditioned.
What?
Not only that, they said, well, what are you going to do for the rest of the day? And I said, I don't know. And Del Close, who's the father, the guru of improv, took me under his wing, and I spent the entire day and into the evening with Del, which was an experience. So, and then I went to Minneapolis, and then I sort of ingratiated myself into the theater. And then Second City called and said, we would like you to come back and audition for the touring company. And I went back and auditioned, which was like cutthroat, but I got in. And I turned it down. I turned it down because I'd already established some stuff in Minneapolis and I wanted to do that. But anyway, that's a side story.
So wait, so what did you leave to go do in Minneapolis? What were you doing there?
This guy had said, I'll give you a job. So I get to Minneapolis and it's like a movie. I've got everything in 2 bags and it's raining and everything like that. He lets me stay with his son, which was an odd situation with a roommate. And I don't know what was going on. And eventually I did get the job in the theater. I was the janitor. That was the job.
You turned down a thing with touring with Second City to go be a janitor in
Minneapolis? No, this happened. I told you out of order,
Okay.
The whole, coming back and auditioning for the touring company, it happened later. Okay. So I became a janitor and I learned Minneapolis sort of. And then I said, gee, this is no good. I don't want to be a janitor. So I left and I got a job in a music store, and then I got a job in a bank, which was insane because I actually worked in the trust vault of this big bank in downtown Minneapolis.
The gambler who can't be trusted with money.
There used to be armed guards in a booth that we had to pass by each time. And I'd take like a wad of AT&T stock and stick it in the front of my pants so they could see it. And I'd walk out, so long, fellas. And they'd laugh. Oh, that's funny.
Wow.
So anyway, eventually the theater in Minneapolis called me back. Would you like to be the music director? Because I played piano of the touring company. And I said, yes. So I did that. And I started to take improv classes and they said, oh, he can really do this. And so I actually went into the resident company, the main stage company at that theater. And then transitioned about 2 years later because I just easily get bored and I'm not really a good actor. I mean, that's a bit of a shock, I know. But this fellow had another.
But you were on Rescue Me.
And that will back me up. So he had another theater across town, and he said, I've been doing this Miss America thing for 30 years. Would you rewrite it and do it? And
Miss America?
Miss America. And I said, even in the, this is the mid 80s, even then, the idea of satirizing Miss America was old. I mean, that's just like such a lame target. And I said, look, I think it would probably be helped if we did that as half the show. And then I'll write a new first act that will be a topical musical review. And so that's what I did. It was called Miss America and Her First Act. And that was the show. And it was a big hit. And that
what was the first act about?
It was just a musical review about life in Minneapolis. And, it was original music and whatever. I wrote all this stuff, and nobody had done it. I'm talking about doing a review like, I don't know if remember the name. This is before my time too, Vicki. So Julius Monk, who had done reviews in New York, In fact, I actually have, it's full of shit right now, but I actually have on the thing an ashtray from the upstairs at the downstairs. Right
upstairs at the downstairs, of course.
Yeah. Sure. So I knew all about review, musical review. So anyway, it led to another musical review, and then a play with music.
Did you sing, Peter? Did you sing and dance?
Yeah, I would sometimes be in them. After a year in Hollywood, Esquire did something about like a comedy issue, and they said they had the top. I'm not going to remember the wording. It was like the top 50 hot people in comedy, and I was number 49. This is after 1 year, by the way. I thought it was pretty impressive. And I was described as former song and dance man, which is not really, if you've ever seen me do any of that, you go, thank God it's former. Thank God.
Oh.
Yeah. But
so have you ever had actor's remorse? Have you had writer's remorse?
No. I mean, every now and then I had a friend who was a casting director, and I'd say, do me a favor, send me out for something, that I would be appropriate for. Just send me out for it. But I wasn't doing it to get a part. I was doing it to go through the experience, to remind myself of the experience, so that I could treat the actors who auditioned for me with a little more compassion.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did that. I did that for a number of years, and it always reminded me of the fucking misery. So I always, was tried to be very kind to people coming in,
Wow, that's okay. So how did this segue happen from being the song and dance man to
I really just, I was like, this is, so the plays were getting done. These plays in that theater in New York. And that's when people from LA started going, are you interested in writing television? And I said, no. I really did, because I had that, I had adopted sort of that Woody Allen, Annie.
I'm a New York.
Yeah, I'm East Coast. I'm in New York, and that's all those people are heathens, and it's all shit. And I think a few years went by, and like I said, I was turning 30, and I think my in-laws were like looking at me going, is this guy ever going to do anything?
Now, are you making a reasonable wage doing this?
No, of course.
No.
I mean, I was working like I worked in an ad agency. I had jobs.
You had day jobs.
In terms of what I was making in the theater, it was some gaudy amount, like, $8,000 a year or something.
Right.
So I just had to get it together. And my first wife and I lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn Heights, and she watched television. I didn't even watch television, but she watched it. And the apartment was small enough that if she was watching it, then I was watching it, or at least I could hear it. At least I could hear it. And I said, I think there's only one show that I could probably write, and that's Murphy Brown. Or it seems to be a smart enough show that I wouldn't be horrified, So I called my agent, from theater agent. I said, I think I want to write television. And he fell to the ground and soiled himself. He couldn't believe he was going to actually make money on me. But
what's interesting, Hollywood wanted you to write television.
Yes.
they found out about you because somebody happened into
Because
one
of
of
the
your
plays,
shows
because of the plays.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then I just said to him, can you send me a Murphy Brown script just so I know what it looks like on the page so I can approximate it.
And
then
you had not studied screenwriting or you didn't read a book, you didn't. No.
I just needed to see what it looked like on the page so I wouldn't make any mistakes in the layout. So I wrote an episode of Murphy Brown.
How many had you watched, Peter, before you?
Well, I don't know. I listened to a lot of them, and I stayed late at my advertising job. I was a copywriter, and I remember writing on like an IBM Selectric, with the ball, and like a lot of correction fluid. And I wrote this, and I gave it to my agent, and he said famously, "I like it. I don't love it. I like it." I said, "Well, you're a bastard." And then
But also, you wrote a Murphy Brown to get a job on Murphy Brown, and we all know that you can't do that.
You can't do that, which I was then told. So he said to me, you don't do this. You don't just say that's the show I'm going to work on and write a script. It doesn't work that way. And I said, well, just tell me when Diane English reads it. I wouldn't even care. I didn't even care. So I kept saying, and now, so they sent that script and several of the plays. And I got a ton of meetings.
They sent the script with a bunch of your plays.
My plays as writing samples.
And he said that to different shows.
Producers shows and everything. So I met all these different people who were like, yeah, you should definitely do television. We would love to have you and blah, blah, blah. And I kept saying, has Diane read it? I kept saying that. And in fact, she did read it and she hired me. And so I bucked that trend.
Do you remember what the episode was about that you wrote?
It was called, I think it was called like Face Value was the title of it. And it had to do with a clause in Murphy's contract that said she could not alter her physical appearance. And it made her say, wait a minute, what's my value here? Is it because I'm a reporter or was it what I look like? We actually did make that show several seasons later. We actually did. I probably rewrote it and we shot a version of it. But so yeah, I ended up working on Murphy Brown.
And you did that for 2-3 years. You did that for a while.
Yeah.
But you wrote for Carol Burnett first?
Yeah. Diane hired me, and then she said, listen, I'm having a contract dispute with Warner Brothers. So I can't hire you now because obviously if I hire you, I'm sending a signal that I'm staying, and I can't send that signal. So you just have to hang in there. And I waited as long as I could. And I was having these other meetings and everything. And finally, I just said to her, I got to get a job. I can't. She goes, well, I still can't hire you yet. And so I took a job with Matt Williams, who was doing this thing called Carol and Company with Carol Burnett. Well, you can imagine what a thrill that was, because I'd grown up, every Saturday night with Carol Burnett. And she's a lovely, lovely woman. And so I did that, but Diane called and said, all right, I'm ready. I'm like, I'm on a show. And she said, well, see if you can write Murphy Brown episodes while you're there. This, by the way, this is never done. And I went to Matt Williams and I said, is there any chance that I can write Murphy Brown episodes while I'm here? And he goes, yeah, don't tell anybody, but sure. So I wrote 2 episodes of the third, I think it was the 3rd season of Murphy Brown while I was not on staff. And then I joined. Then I joined, and Carol's show ended, and there was some sort of futzy thing with Disney where they said, well, you owe us another thing. And I was like, I don't think I do. I mean, I don't know a lot about contracts, but I think I don't owe you anything. But rather than just leave, I did Matt's next show, which was Home Improvement. And
wait a minute, you did something first, Wish You Were Here. Didn't you do?
That was actually before anything. I did that in New York.
Okay.
The weird show that I did.
So you did Home Improvement before you ended up going to Murphy Brown physically?
Yeah, I did the pilot and the first 6 episodes. And I think I wrote one of those first 6 episodes. And Matt, I made.
How did you get hired as a co-producer when you're this guy from New York writing plays with the thing? How does that happen?
It's so I mean, it's somewhat the luck of the draw, because you ask a good question, Vicki. How did I, a picture at the time, end up with all these highfalutin titles? You know, I should have been a staff writer on that.
I mean, yeah, how do you end up as a co-producer on Home Improvement?
What happened was Matt knew I was going to, you know, he knew I wanted to leave, but I think he wanted to sweeten the pot, you know, and sort of try to convince me to stay. So he made me a co-producer on Home Improvement.
And you only wrote one episode out of the 6? I only wrote one
episode. I worked on the pilot and the other 6 with them, the other 5 with them. But
so how much input were you? How much were you doing?
A lot.
A lot.
A lot. But see, then it got dicey. Because then my agent had to call Diane and go, well, he's definitely coming, but you know, he's a co-producer on Home Improvement. And I just know that put her teeth on edge, because I did not deserve it. Like, I certainly did not deserve to be a co-producer on Murphy Brown. Well, I was. And the show won Best Comedy that year. So I got an Emmy. I always call that my unearned Emmy, you know, where it was nice to have it, but I didn't really do anything.
You earned it as a co-producer?
Yes.
You know, my manager, Mark Reiser, was the one who was making all of Diane's deals. He's the one that held up that thing and made that money deal.
Yeah.
But so you got it as a co-producer, not, yeah, wow.
And so it just sort of went from there, that I kept getting these sort of cascading titles.
Wow.
You know, it was very accelerated, and it was just the luck of the draw. It was an accelerated situation, so that, you know, then one off season on Murphy, I went to do Larry Sanders. And
okay, so how did that relationship with Garry? Oh, Garry, how did that relationship start? It
actually started because the fellow who was originally EPing Larry Sanders' show was Fred Barron, who's a lovely guy, lovely guy in the business. And I had done an episode of a show with him and Billy Crystal the year before on HBO. The show was called Sessions, about a guy in therapy and whatever. I'd written one of those, and so I knew both Billy and Fred. Now Fred was doing Larry Sanders. He said, any chance you want to come over as a consulting producer? And I said, yeah, that would be great. And I went over, and I'd be in my office, and I could hear through the wall. My office was next to Fred's. I could hear him fighting with Garry. And I was like, uh-oh, this isn't going to be good. And Fred was out. And so Garry said to me, do you want to be the EP? I said, yeah.
Wow.
So that's how I became an EP on Sanders. I mean, the good thing was.
Did you co-create Larry Sanders with?
No.
You didn't.
No, the person who co-created it never worked on the show. It's a gentleman named Dennis Klein, who created the show with Garry, and then they had a falling out. And
Garry had a lot of falling.
Had a lot of falling out. That was the theme, you know, that was the theme at like his memorial service. The number of people who got up and said, I wasn't speaking to Garry. Really, they're only.
I wasn't at the memorial because he wasn't speaking to me at the end.
Say, of course, there you go. But it's more the people. I always say to Judd, like, how did we do it? Like, how did we stay to the end and not get iced out? I still don't know, but I have no idea, but whatever. But I really hooked into what he wanted to do, you know, and it was.
How was your day to day with? I mean, did you ever was he ever yelling? Were you ever the one he was yelling at, or did you not have that?
Never. He never yelled at me. In fact, when people would tell me stories about Garry yelling at them, I'd just shake my head like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Wow.
Because I'd heard.
You never even witnessed him doing it to other people?
No. I heard it through the wall with Fred, but then never again. Wow. So, you know, and then once I left Larry Sanders, they would have trouble finding people. Not that I was so great. They just couldn't find people that he was comfortable with. And he'd lose faith in people. And I'm sure there was some yelling then. But again, I wasn't there and I didn't hear it. I was helping him sweep up, you know, and writing more episodes, even though I wasn't on the show. But so
that was an earned Emmy.
That was a very earned Emmy, and I was nominated about 8 billion times.
Yes, you were nominated 14.
And
You've been nominated 14
always
times.
lose. And sometimes I'd be nominated twice in the same category. It was like, I can't believe this. So I was ready. When we finally won, I was like ready. I knew exactly what I was going to say because I had come up with it like 3 years earlier.
So what did you finally win it for?
The series finale. Took it right down to the wire. The series finale. Oh my God. Garry said something. He spoke first when we won, and he said something like, well, it's still an honor to be nominated. And then he told me to say, Garry, we won. Oh, well, that's good too. That's good too. And then I said, I think it says something about our business and our country as a whole, that in the year, whatever the year was, a comedy writing award can be won by a Gentile. And I thank you. So that was what I said. Huge laugh. And we went off stage and we were heading down the hall, and he just goes to me, don't ever be that funny again. I had gotten a bigger laugh than he had, so I think he was a little annoyed.
That's really fabulous.
Don't ever be that funny again. Tom Brokaw was in the wings when we came out. That was very funny, young man.
Okay. So how did your relationship with Dennis Leary start on the job, right?
He had been watching Larry Sanders, like everybody else in the business, and nobody else, by the way. You could talk to anybody in the country and say, I work on Larry Sanders. They just look at you like, what's that? And,
What?
Is that people in the business watch that show, and not a lot of
Really?
as Variety likes to call them, non-pros. Not a lot of those people watch the show. So it was a mystery. And remember, this was in the early days of HBO, and a lot of people didn't get HBO.
Well, that's true. That's
really
true.
like working in a vacuum, except in the business.
Right.
And he had been watching the show and really enjoying it. And he wrote my name down. He either watched one of my episodes or whatever, and he wrote my name down on a pad.
And at the time, Dennis was doing stand-up. Was he doing, what else was he doing? He was in a movie.
He'd been doing movies.
And wait, had you done any movies to this point? Because you've done a lot of movies. Had you done any movies to this point?
Probably that had started. Yeah, they overlapped. I thought I was going to retire to movies, but they just started. They overlapped, and I did like a lot of movies, and I read every movie. And oh God, the 90s and into the the early aughts was a lot of stuff. But Dennis finally wanted to do a TV show, and he'd done the Thomas Crown Affair, and he had a guy, a New York City detective. That's what he was playing in the movie. But he had a guy who had been a real detective who was his technical advisor, and the guy's life was a shit show. And he looked at it and said, "I'd love to make that show. I'd like to make that show." But he'd never done television, so he had that pad still, and my name was on it. So he said, "I want to meet him." So I went to Connecticut, to his house in Connecticut, was driven up there, and he had quite a large Irish wolfhound at the time, who immediately upon me arriving buried its head in my balls. So I'm like, this is a great start. Usually it's the talent who does that, but I can accept this. And so we talked, and I love to remind him of this because I was never like a real big fan of his stand-up. So anyway, he said, "I want to do a TV show, and this is the idea, and I've written some pages," which is never good. If an actor says,
"I want a star, and I've written some pages."
An actor with pages is like a 3-year-old with a Glock. Nothing good is going to come of that. So, but I took the pages. It turned out to be almost a whole script, by the way. And now I'm being driven back to New York, and I start to read the script. And as I'm reading...
Wait, before you tell me about the script, what did he pitch you verbally before you took the pages?
He said, I'm a New York City detective. My life is a fucking mess. I'm married. I got a girlfriend. I got an addiction. I got a thing. I got a whatever. That's all.
Okay.
So it was going to be like, sort of a real life look at a squad of New York City detectives. So I started to read these pages.
Is it funny? Is it serious? Is it fun? It's both.
It was mostly fun. It was mostly fun. It was meant, it was meant to be a half-hour thing.
Mm-hmm.
So as I'm reading, I start to think, what would I write on the next page? And I start to turn the page and it would be there. Or some version of it.
Wow.
And because that happened, I went, I think I can work with this guy. I think we have, and of course, once we get to know each other, we're both from Massachusetts. We're both Irish Catholic upbringing, all this. So we had all this groundwork already laid between us. It's almost like a shorthand. And so we wrote the show together and really got on incredibly well. And then while we were shooting that show, which was called The Job, it's a really wonderful show.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody watching this, the DVD set is available for sale.
Is it the DVD? Is it available to stream? I know I watched a couple of episodes. No,
I don't think it is. I think somebody told me it was, and I've never been able to track it down. But it's a wonderful show. It's really funny.
I'm going to track that down.
You should. It's really good. And it's the precursor to Rescue Me. It's Rescue Me without the drama part, because I was shooting an episode. I was directing an episode of The Job on 9/11. I'd left Manhattan. I was in Seabright, New Jersey, 30 minutes down the coast. Mm-hmm. And we'd set up, they set up the monitors for the day. It was early morning and they'd set up the monitors. And somebody said, a plane just hit the World Trade Center. I said, what? So now we all gather around the monitors. Well, you could walk from the monitors down the beach and look up towards Manhattan and see the snow.
Oh, wow.
So now we're just trying to figure out, what are we going to do? And I said to the AD, I think we have to let everybody go home because people are flipping out. And I don't know how some of these people are going to get home. Like, how are people going to get to Long Island? So it was a big deal. So we left. And as I'm talking to him about this, tiny pieces of paper are coming down like snow, tiny, between us. So Dennis and I, once we had to start shooting 3 days later for insurance purposes. We had to shoot one scene, which I'll never forget because we shot in somebody's basement. And the people next door, their father had not come home. Oh. And so people were, and that was when you were sort of living in the city and there were all the posters, missing and that whole thing. And the smell of a massive electrical fire in the city. And we knew a lot of firefighters. And I said to Dennis one day,
didn't he have firefighters in his family?
Yeah, he had yes, and one who passed away in a terrible fire earlier than this time, his cousin. And I said to him, thinking about the guys working on the pile, I said, this is the show we should be doing. Can you imagine what their life is going to be like after this, processing this? And I promptly forgot about it. And a year later, he called me and he said, I think we should do that show now. And I'm just like, I don't even know what you're talking about. He goes, that show about when you were talking about the pile and the guys. And that's how we did Rescue Me.
Wow. And how did it come to be a thing that he would see ghosts, that there would be, because that was a very interesting choice.
Yeah, I didn't like that choice, to be honest with you. I was against that choice. And then I would constantly be on Dennis saying, here are the rules of your stupid ghosts, okay? Here are the rules. Like I remember one time he said, he comes home and his cousin Jimmy, who's the main ghost, who died in 9/11, is sort of staying with him or showing up a lot in the house that he's in. And he goes, hey, while you were away at work today, your wife had some guy over. And I said, no. The ghost is an internalized expression of something. It can't tell you things you don't know, okay? Like it always. hounding him about those stupid ghosts. Then we had Jesus and it just got out of hand.
Jesus was crazy. Jesus was crazy.
I know. So I said, I don't think that's the show we're doing. I think we're doing a realistic portrayal that sometimes, yes, gets comedic, but it's mostly a realistic portrayal of these people, their lives and whatever. So to put that dramatic invention into that thing felt wrong to me, and it still does.
You know, I'm in season 3 now, and I watched the original in real time, so it's been a long time. So I can't remember. Right now, it's at a point of trying to figure out, are the ghosts there because he meets some woman who says that you can see dead people or something? Like, is he really seeing dead people, or is he totally whack? You know, like, what's happening there?
He may have. If you ask Dennis, he might have a different. I'm going to put a light on because it's getting a little dark.
Yeah, good.
See if I can.
That's good.
Lighten it up. I don't know.
Wait, no, now you're part. There you go.
Is that too much?
No.
Okay. He
Put
had
it a little more on your face, Peter. It's on down low. There you go.
There?
Yeah.
I'm ready for my close-up. So he may have thought these were sort of hauntings. And I kept saying, this is a manifestation of feeling, of loss, of something. If I could draw that line to it, then I gave it a psychological underpinning so it could make sense dramatically, that it was coming from that place. And that's why I really was on him about if it doesn't fit into that category of psychological expression of something, then we can't do it. It has to be that. Otherwise, we're taking such a big swing. Well, we pared back on those things as the series go on, but the series ends with a ghost. It ends with him driving away with Lou.
All right, don't remind me, because I don't remember, and you're giving me a spoiler, and I'm in season 3, and I'm like, no,
I won't say anything.
Well, Lou, I already know who Lou is. Love Lou. I love them all. I mean, they're just such a part of they're part of our family now. We watch it every night, and I just love them. So you and Dennis, you have ideas for maybe doing something else again?
Yeah, we always talk about it. Whenever we get together, it's like, we got to do something, because the grave is frankly yawning open for both of us, and especially him with that smoking. You can probably hear the Grim Reaper every day. But we always say we got to do it. We got to do it. And the show that I mentioned to you about the Catholic priest, I said, wouldn't you want to do that? And he's like, first of all, I don't think you can do it. I don't think you can pull it off. And whatever. And I said, oh, I'll show you. And I wrote it. And he went, God, this is really funny. And whatever. And I said, so do you want to do it? And he went, nope. He has such a negative reaction to the church based on his own experience that he said, I just don't want to play that. So much for that idea.
All right. Well, so is there something called, all right, so those two things, and you've gone through this crisis, you're in a bit of a crisis about, please know that it's not a fluke. It was all and like every word is a gem. I mean, just an absolute gem. I cannot tell you the joy. I can't wait. We watch it late at night, and I can't wait to get to the next episode. It's really true. And it's really in my top 5 of all time. It's just, and I've been screaming about it in all the rooms as they were, and telling everybody. So you have all these new fans of young people that didn't see it the first time around that are really loving it.
I do appreciate that.
Well, you're doing a service to them as well. Boy, if there's ever been a calling card for don't drink, I mean, I don't know. There's some crazy shit that goes on. We just watched the episode where Sheila sets up Tommy and puts vodka on his thing and busts up his house, and just crazy shit going on. Crazy shit. So all right, so those two shows aside that you'd love to do, is there something, would you like to do like all right, so before we move on from this, the Mad About You reboot, which, by the way, my daughter, everything in the original Mad About You, Jamie and Paul, what was my life with Gabe. Exactly. We used to think they were coming in. I think everybody thought that they were coming into our house with a camera and they were recording our life and that they were putting it up on TV. And I felt the same way about the reboot. My daughter was at Tisch, the whole thing.
Yeah.
What brought you to that? That seemed to be like a different feeling than anything you'd done before.
Yeah, I can't say that I really watched the original that much. I maybe saw 1 or 2 episodes, but didn't really remember it. It was more a case of Paul and Helen looking for a partner who could run a show, who could, get their vision on the screen. And, it's one of those situations. They've done 160 episodes of the show. I'm not going to tell them anything new about their show. I'm going to say, here's where the characters are now. What stories can we tell that will be, evocative in terms of where they are in their marriage, where they are at their age and all that. So that's what we focused on. So it was just, it was different. I haven't done a lot of half hours like that, but it was different and really enjoyable. I actually said to Paul and Helen at one point, and again, it was really hard because of the schedule, just that. And I said to the two
how
women,
so?
An impossible. Like they said, you've got to have all the episodes done by X date. And we were like, well, we didn't know that going in, but okay. And then 1 month later, we got to move it up. Can you have 6 of them done by this date? And it just kept getting compressed. It was really hard.
Did you write with Paul? Did you write separately? How did that work?
We did both.
And was that a good collaboration for you?
Yeah, very, very good. Like I would never have been able to, I couldn't have done it without Paul. That's how much we were writing together. I could not have physically done it without Paul. He's a very good writer. I don't think he gets a lot of credit for that, but he's a very good writer. And I have to say again, never could have done it.
Okay, so the last thing I wanted to ask you about, one film to touch on, analyze this, working with De Niro and Billy Crystal.
Yeah.
How did you come into that experience and how did that evolve and what was that like for you?
I was doctoring a lot of scripts back then. I would doctor scripts. I would see movies before they came out. People would say to me, if we were to pay for 1 week of reshoots, what would you suggest we reshoot? And I'd say this and that, so I was doing all sorts of things. In the case of Analyze This, there had been an original script, which I never saw, by Ken Lonergan. So I can't speak to any of that because I didn't see it. Then there was another, the next draft was written by a writer who I know. It's a television writer. And so they gave it to me and I went in and I said, look, this is going to be silly and you shouldn't do it. There's only really one way to do this. You have to do it with an actor where the audience sort of believes that they're the character, which means you can only do it with somebody who is in The Godfather. This is what I said, and I believe this because otherwise it's just silly, But if you sort of in the back of your mind go, well, he was in The Godfather. I mean, that's Michael Corleone, or that's whoever that is, That's young.
It's Vito.
That's young Vito. I mean, of course, whatever. So they said they agreed with me, and so I said I'm going to write a script that will attract one of those guys, But I was also working with Billy. Billy was involved and whatever. So the way we wrote it was we'd sit together and improvise. So Billy would play his part and I would be De Niro. So some of those.
Did you do it with De Niro in mind specifically?
Yeah, I was trying to get De Niro. That's who I really, of all those actors, I said, this is the guy who I think can do comedy. Don't ask me why I thought that. I said, this is the guy I think that can do comedy. And so I would be De Niro, and so we'd be in Billy's office and I'd be writing everything down. But some of the lines from that, I can still remember. Usually people say to me, did you write this? And I go, it's been too long. I don't remember. I sat on that couch and he goes, oh, here's what it is. And I go, you are good. Yes, you are. You're good. The wait is, where did it go? I don't know. You're good. You're good. People still come up to me and go, you. But that was just through improvisation, sitting there and doing them.
Wow.
So I wrote the script, and then we sent it to De Niro, and he was interested. And we went to New York and had a meeting with him, and he was like, I would do this. He's somewhat taciturn, I think we can say about Mr. De Niro.
Mhm.
And so
A very good friend of mine's his restaurant partner, Drew Nieprint. Yeah.
Okay. So I then went off and I took what he said and tried to incorporate it in the script. But remember, I'd worked with Billy before. So I got Billy here, and then I got Bob over here, and I wrote the most schizophrenic draft of all time. It was just like,
is he intimidating? Was he intimidating?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, my second wife we just had our first child, and we were going for Christmas up in Massachusetts, and my son at that time was less than 2 months old. And so it's freezing cold in New York. She can't leave the hotel room. So she's stuck in the hotel with a 2-month-old, right? And De Niro says, maybe if you stay another day, we can talk again tomorrow. And I go, well, really, my wife is stuck in the thing. And he says, what are you, a man or a mouse?
No, he didn't.
Not quite sure he was kidding. And I said, well, throw a piece of cheese down and I'll show you. I mean, I just made a joke out of it, but he was intimidating. Again, not because he's an asshole or anything, he just doesn't say a lot.
Wow.
So like there was a director who was brought in at one point to do that movie. And they had a meeting, and something happened in the meeting. And I don't know I don't remember what it was, but the guy left, and everybody sort of looked at Bob and said, what do you think? And he said, this guy, I got no faith in. This guy, I got no faith in. 7 words. He was out. And he was told, the guy was told, he'd come from London, and he was told, you're out. And he wept in that moment. And I'm just like, ooh, this is a fucking tough business, man.
Wow.
So Bob was a man of few words, but had a sense. Anyway, I wrote a schizophrenic draft. I was doing Billy, the shticklock, I was doing the funny and the thing. And then when Bob, I'd be doing like Goodfellas. It was just like, it was insane. I couldn't crack it. And I said, look, I don't know how to do this. I'm sorry. I have to recuse myself.
Really?
I left the project. And then Harold came in. And Harold knew how to do both. He was the one who took my screenplay and then figured out the way to do it. And then he called me and said, you have to come back now and help me get it ready to shoot and work on some other character stuff and whatever else. So it was really Harold who cracked the key on that movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
You said earlier that you didn't watch TV, that your wife would have TV on. Do you watch TV now, or do you still not watch TV?
I have to force myself. I'm not a good viewer, but I do watch television.
Well, why are you not a good viewer? Because you're critical?
Yeah, it's that thing of being in it and kind of going, well, everybody says this is good. What the, I'm just like, however, I feel like my career is bookending because my overall ends at the end of the year with FX. And it's not a good time for overalls. And it's also not a great time for older white guys. So I've really hit perfectly. I'm in a perfect place. So there's every possibility I may not, for the first time in something like 27 years, may not be in an overall. And that's not the end of the world, of course. But my agent said to me, is there a show you'd like to work on if it comes to that? Mm-hmm. And I said, yes, Succession.
Would you make that even better?
It's the same thing all over again. I came in going, I only want to work on that show. I only want to work on Murphy Brown. And now I'm saying, yeah, I only want to work on that show. So I'm just, I'm dooming myself.
Well, I don't know. So far, it's worked out pretty well for you, Peter.
Yeah, so far, Vicki.
So
but then
far,
what?
so good.
But
I
then
don't
what?
know. I think I'm going to be seeing your name in those credits pretty soon.
Well, you'll be seeing my name, hopefully, on Broadway, as we used to say on the Radio for Europe commercial.
Really?
Yeah, several years ago. In fact, while I was working with Norman, I was approached about writing a play based on the book, not the movie, the original book of The War of the Roses. And
Wow.
I did it, and it's going on broad. In fact, I'm leaving here to have dinner with the producers and Jason Alexander, who's directing.
I just wrote to Jason's person 3 hours ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Jay is making a name for himself as a director in the theater. He's done some wonderful stuff. So we've been working on that for the last 2 or 3 years, and so now it's actually going to happen either fall of next year or spring.
How thrilling is that?
It's really, I mean, it's a dream, and I'm not, if it happens, that's fantastic. I just hope it happens before I pass away.
Oh,
But
please do me a favor. Tell Jason when you go to dinner that you just did this show, because I just spoke to his person this afternoon because he said yes to Nancy Allen, have her call my person, and the person is giving me a hard time. But Jason said yes.
Okay,
Anyway.
I'll tell him you said hi.
I would appreciate that. Please do not ever think for 1 second that this was a fluke, because I have so adored your work. And I'm telling you, I wait with bated breath every night to watch again. So I look forward to whether it's Broadway, if it's watching your shows on Succession, if it's the show that you get made with the priest, I want to watch, and I'm going to be there.
Too.
Thank you so much for doing this again, Peter. It was wonderful to see you.
Great to see you too. Take care.